Right now, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Steve.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Steve Badancic. I'm a partner with Go 8 Music at the Boast. We've been working with the board for a number of months now and committing to put together a set of amended and restated covenants. It's a series of 3 documents. The first one being the Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. The second being the Articles of Incorporation. And the third being the bylaws. There are 3 reasons why communities do this. 3 important reasons. The first is that your documents were originally drafted in 2001 by a developer who has an interest in writing documents from a developer's perspective and not from a homeowner's perspective. Having been on both sides of that fence, I can tell you that they are intentionally written that way, and that the provisions in there sometimes are not in the best interest of the community that you bought into, from a post-turnover perspective. Additionally, the developer is throughout the document. There are references to the developer, the clearance, developer rights, turnover, all these provisions, which for someone buying in the community today would be quite confusing as to what is this language about the developer. Okay? Also, your documents were written at a time when the development could have included condominiums and could have included other types of housing, which if you look through the documents, they talk about provisions for sub-associations of condominiums. Well, as you know, that didn't happen. So from a buyer's perspective, that can be quite confusing. The second reason why we do this is that it gives you one stack of paperwork to be able to have, which constitutes all of the covenants. After the original 2001 declaration, there was a number of amendments. They were all by the developer. Little tweaks here and there, bringing in different pieces of real estate or changing for certain things here or there, changing the number of lots from the 700 and something to 580 throughout the documents. And there were 4 or 5 amendments. And so from a simplicity standpoint, the question is, well, which document are we looking at? Are we looking at the 4.1 from 1990, from 2001, or the 4.1 from the amendment 2006, or which one are we looking at? And likewise, when you go to sell your home, you're required to copy the HOA documents to a buyer. And oftentimes people won't print off the amendments because they don't know where to find them, because they were drafted after you originally purchased your home. If you're an original purchaser earlier on in the community, you didn't have that amendment because it wasn't recorded yet, right? It wasn't approved yet. So what we're doing is we're bringing all those documents into one. So no longer is there the original declaration, or would there be the original declaration with 5, 6, 7 amendments afterwards. It's one document that we're basically condensing everything into. And it's a restated document, all right? Which means that we're replacing what's there. For us to go through and underline and strike through and fix the entire document word by word by fitting the good stuff in with what you have right now, it would take 3 or 4 times the cost, to be frank with you. So we have a form that we know is up to date with statute and code, and we fit what's good in your current documents into the form. It's a much cheaper and quicker process. And the result is that you have one document that you can look for your declaration without the amendments, one document for the bylaws without the amendments, and one document for the articles that you can look to without the amendments. Okay? The third reason is that in 2001, there wasn't even a homeowners act under Chapter 720. There was no Chapter 720. The idea of a homeowners association was buried in Chapter 617, which still, at the time, governed not-for-profit corporations. Okay? So as you can imagine, just like the condominium statute, which started much, much earlier, the 720 has evolved immensely, especially over the last 4 or 5 years. So when these documents were drafted, there simply wasn't a statutory framework under which to work with. So now that we have so much more guidance in terms of whether it be arbitration decisions or court decisions, or Chapter 720 itself, or the flushing out of Chapter 720 over the years, we're able to now make sure that the documents are, I don't want to say up to par, but they're certainly up to code with what has been adopted by the legislature and what they deem is wise for single-family home communities, similar to Saturnia Lakes. So those are the 3 reasons why we do this. I've done dozens of amendments. I've done a number of these restatement projects. And those are the 3 reasons why we do it. Again, first, because the developer wrote these from their perspective, not yours. The developer is referenced throughout the document, which now has absolutely no relevance whatsoever. It's only confusing me. The second main reason being that we're condensing all those amendments into one document. So there's no more, well, the 2006 4.1 and the 2001 4.1. There's just the new restated 4.1, okay? And the third reason being that at the time these documents were drafted, there was no statutory framework. There was minimal. And now we have an entire chapter of Florida statutes devoted to homeowners associations. And so we want to make sure that the documents reflect what this legislature has deemed appropriate for homeowners associations and for lakes. So that's why we do this. Most associations, even the condos that have been around for 20 or 30 years, they've done it once, sometimes done it twice, sometimes done it 3 times, because things change. The statute changes, the way development happens changes. Your documents, one prime example is that your developer had a lending company. Okay? Your developer had a lender, an in-house lender. And these provisions basically say that if a foreclosing bank forecloses and takes title, guess what? The bank doesn't pay a penny, right? Which is so much more restrictive and against your interest than even the statute was and is now. Okay? Because they knew that when they lent the money to their in-house lending company, if the in-house lending company had to foreclose, they would have to pay past due HOA dues. Whether it was their lender or whether it was at Wall Street or the mortgage-backed security, whoever they sold a mortgage to, they put that in there so that people could borrow money and that lenders would lend in here. And which is a good thing, but the same token, they did it with the idea that they were protecting them, not you. So the proposed documents, one of the main reasons to do this is say no more of that. That if you're foreclosing first mortgagee, after $30,000 racked up in past due HOA dues, interest, late fees, attorney's fees, costs, and all that, then you're at a minimum responsible for what the statute provides. Okay? So that's one of the main reasons why we're doing this, and there are many other, but that's an example of, you may not realize that that's what they actually said. So it's worth it to dig deep and realize what we have and how the statutes and how the laws changed over the last 5-10 years and how we can make things better. So I'm sure there'll be some discussion. I'm, of course, able to answer any questions. I'm able to highlight some of the differences if you want me to.
You can give some examples and then we'll go all the way through it and the last one.
Sure, yeah, I'll give a couple more examples. Another one being the fact that in 2001, the statute said nothing about lien priority rights. Okay. The statute back then said the documents have your association has a lien when the lien says they're effective. And in the documents currently, they say the lien is effective when the lien is recorded. Okay? That's very different from what the law is today. Today, the law is that the lien relates back to the original declaration. So right now, your lien priority date should be 2001, no matter when you record it. Unfortunately, these documents say that your lien priority is based on when you record the lien. So if the association is 3rd or 4th in line, under the current documents, they're 3rd and 4th in line. Under the proposed documents and what the statute says today, you're first in line to everybody but first mortgage. Okay, so that's a huge advantage that you may not realize that that's what's there right now. Because at the time, that was the law, and it was not nearly as good for you as it is today. Sometimes in these projects, it's easier to highlight what's not being changed as well, as opposed to what is being changed to maybe calm some fears or concerns. Obviously, one of the hot topics is pets. There's no changes or proposed changes to the number or size of pets that we can have in the community. Okay? That's what is the law now in the documents will be the law afterwards. So again, sometimes it's better to say what's not changing to help out. Regarding sales, the association does not, the documents do not provide the association with essentially any more authority that it has now to approve or deny the sale of a home in the community. The association would have a copy of the contract. They can request information relevant to the sale. But just like the current documents, the sale would not be able to be prohibited by the association or the proposed documents. Okay? Architectural review is not going away. The current documents have a very extensive architectural review procedure. Some of it, which I believe is not good or superfluous or is not necessary. And so I believe that the proposed documents clean up the procedure a little bit in order to, I don't want to say streamline the process, but certainly make it more clear. The current documents have a system of requests and then approval and then notification of completion and then double check that it was completed in time for appeal. And it's a little cumbersome. It's certainly not what many other communities of your stature, your size are doing right now. Okay. In the bylaws, for example, Florida law now provides that you can provide electronic notice to those who consent to receive electronic notice. Email. The association is going to be mailing all of these documents out to you for review. That costs money. That's a lot of postage. And for those of you who consent, you say, I'd rather receive electronic notice than mailing notice, you can do that. And that'll save a lot of costs for the association, because most of you check your email, frankly, probably your post mailbox during the day. So we're now allowing for that mechanism of providing e-notice to those who want to receive notice. If you want yours in the mail, you're absolutely still entitled to get yours in the mail. But if you want to receive e-notice, you can do so. The nomination procedures changed in 2013 in the Florida statutes, and the new documents reflect that nomination procedure change. Now the association can have a procedure by which nominations are closed in advance of the meeting. It's something that I wish they would have done many, many years ago. The condo statute has that, and it's somewhat of an anomaly and procedurally cumbersome item to not have that in the HOA statute. So something like that is now in the bylaws, so that the bylaws either don't contradict or aren't supported by the statute. The quorum for membership meeting is going to stay the same. It was 30% before, it's going to be 30% after. And one thing I also want to make sure we talk about, which I know is apparently a concern for people, is the idea of a spending limit for the board. And I want to make sure I address that right off the bat. The current documents provide that the board cannot make an alteration or improvement costing in excess of $5,000 without going to membership. We represent hundreds, if not 1,000, community associations, whether it be condos or HOAs in the state of Florida. And that is an incredibly low threshold for a community of your size with your budget. Incredibly low. Most HOAs don't have any spending cap. Most condos do, right? Because condos have this concept of you cannot do material alterations or improvements without going to the membership anyway. That statutory procedure is not in Chapter 720, which governs HOAs. So that default rule, which you have applicable to condos, is not a default rule applicable to HOAs. It can be self-imposed. And that's what happened with the developer in the original documents. They self-imposed a restriction that said if you're going to materially alter or improve the common areas, the board can't do it unless it costs less than $5,000. Again, my experience is that this is very, very, very low compared to communities much, much smaller than you. Now, let alone communities the size of 580 homes or the budgets that you have. The other part of this I want to show is that the proposed document says an aggregate of $30,000 per year in the board's discretion for hosting membership. All right, so I'll answer questions and then let's make sure I get through this. It only applies to material alterations or improvements. Okay, so we're talking about a somewhat small class of items. All right, so when the irrigation pump breaks and needs to be replaced, this provision in the current documents and the new documents has nothing to do with the board's spending cap. Right? Necessary maintenance of the common areas, using reserves for things that are broken or the useful life has expired. Under the current documents and under the proposed documents, the board's authority remains the same. It has a fiduciary duty to fix those things. All right? And the spending cap doesn't apply right now under the current documents and under the new documents. What we're talking about is material alterations or improvements to the common areas, where right now it says you can't do it if it costs more than $5,000 without going to the membership. What the proposed documents say, an aggregate of $30,000 per calendar year before going to the membership. So I'm happy to discuss with you. I'm sure there are questions. I'm sure the board is going to be discussing this as well. But I want to make sure I calm the fears that I can, which is that this is even at $30,000, it's a relatively low threshold for an And I want to make sure that there's no misconception out there that this means that the board can spend $400,000 a year willy-nilly without going to membership. That's absolutely not what we're talking about. So this is a somewhat small sliver of things that come before the board, right? Material alterations and improvements. And the cap is adequate for 30 per year. For example, if the association wanted to install some additional security cameras, right, it costs $5,001 under the current documents. There's some extreme circumstances for maintenance or whatnot, but if they just want to do it for the sake of doing it, they could do it without going to the membership. Right? And trust me, I've seen these bids, $5,000 for security cameras will not get you very far. All right? Nowadays, when you're dealing with large communities, $5,000 does not get you very far in anything that you're trying to accomplish. And so that was one of my recommendations to the board, that they needed to address that because it does strap their hands, so to speak, to be able to do things which they believe is necessary to improve business judgment of the association. So, again, I cannot give you a exact word-for-word comparison of what is in the new documents and the old documents. That would take a very, very long time to show you an underlying stricken through version because it doesn't exist, right? Because we're taking a new template and taking your good stuff and putting it in the new template, as opposed to taking your form and trying to fit the good stuff in, the new good stuff into it. Trust and understand that would be much more difficult and much more expensive to do. So this time I'm addressing it right.
Discussion of capital assessment also. I think that's.
Oh yes. Resale capital contributions. Only HOAs can do them. It's a concept that when you go to sell your home, not you, but the buyer, the purchaser, would be responsible to pay a one-time capital contribution. It's rampant right now in HOAs that they're all doing this. It's an idea to raise capital, right? If people want to buy in Saturnia Lakes, they want to buy in Saturnia Lakes. It's a beautiful community. And right now, the threshold, right now the capital contribution that the buyer would pay is $1,000 one time at the time of purchase. Most all of you, whether you realize or not, paid something similar when you bought your home from the developer. And they have called it something else, but you probably paid a capital contribution. And after turnover, most associations inherently don't have the right to continue that practice. It's usually only inherent to the developer, but now many of our clients are moving towards wanting to charge this one-time assessment to buyers, not to sellers, but to buyers. And it's due at the time of purchase. We represent 2,001 communities where the capital contribution is $3,000. We represent smaller HOAs where it's 500 or two quarters of assessments or 1,500. Okay, the amounts vary across the board. Some people do 5% of the purchase price, which is I think ridiculous. But that's what some communities have gotten to. So the proposed number of 1,000 is right in line with communities of your size and the property values in here. And so it's again, paid by the purchaser, not by the seller, to do a closing, and it would be on the estoppel, it would be paid at closing on the HUD statement, and that's how that would be addressed. Of course, if you wanted to, you could, as the seller, you could agree to pay it if you really wanted to in a contract negotiation process, but the default mechanism would be as the buyer's responsibility.
Okay, do we have questions now? I'd like to take one at a time, and then, Steve, if you could repeat the question so we can make sure we get that. Yes, sir, Matt.
Thank you. Stephen, we actually spoke once before to help me close the sale of Michael Ramos.
Okay.
My question relates to the changes in the voting as it relates to the association. And what I mean by that is setting the amount of the capital contribution or whether it's a good idea or not, setting that aside. At present, under our current documents, such a capital contribution would require amendment to the declaration, which by our current rules requires 388 votes. Do I have that right? 67% of 5 acres.
I don't have the math in my head, but it is 2/3 of 5 acres.
Yeah, grant me the math. If these documents, the way they're currently written, are passed, the capital contribution can be changed, again, from what I'm reading, what you sent us. The capital contribution can be changed unilaterally by the board as often as they like for as much as they like, meaning 388 votes required to add a capital contribution now would change to 3 board members. Do I have that right?
The amount would be established in the way it's currently drafted, yes, that's.
Everything I said is correct.
Yes.
Unlimited, they can raise it as often as they like, and it would require 3 board member votes instead of 388 owner votes.
After it's established, that's correct, and which is not an uncommon mechanism. I drafted the
Respectfully, you're a
process.
heck of a salesman, I just wanted to discuss the matter. Now, as it relates to passing other amendments to the declaration, right now, any amendment to the declaration requires a 2/3 vote, or 388 of us have to agree. Should these documents go into effect, it now will require only 2/3 of a quorum, which is 30%, meaning 2/3 of 30% or 116 people. So 388 yea votes will be replaced by a minimum number of 116 yea votes to pass any amendment. Do I have that right?
It's a little bit of a mischaracterization because the more people who show up in the quorum.
Well, I'm just asking for
Right.
the minimum. Right now, the minimum is 388, and seeing as I don't think we have a quorum tonight, and this is the most important thing affecting the association in my 10 years here, right now, the minimum number is 388 for any amendment to the declaration. After the passing of this, it will be 116.
Again, 116 is a little bit of a mischaracterization.
No, it's not. It's the minimum number.
But that's only assuming you have an exact 30% quorum. If you have
That's my
40%
question.
show up,
That's
that
my
number
question.
goes up.
The minimum number to pass it will be 116.
That's correct, but again, you have to clarify.
That is correct.
You have to clarify it, but it depends how many people are in the room. Saying 116 is not correct. If
It
there's
is
40
correct,
If there's
because
40% who show up at the meeting.
the question I'm asking is the minimum number. There can only be one figure, and 116 is it.
He's right about the number, but that's
He's
assuming
right about it.
exactly 30% show up.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a question?
I have basically same comments. I signed up to speak. Section 4 is what he brought up the first time, that the board, 3 people out of 580 can change the capital contribution amount anytime, any amount that they want. I think that's a poor thing for us homeowners to have to go through. This board may be fine. Future boards, I don't trust. We can get some really bad boards in here. To the second one, the proposed declaration about item 6, which talks about $30,000. You characterize it different in your comments than what's written here. If it's an aggregate amount for the total year, that's one thing. If it's $30,000, whenever they decide to spend it, that's another thing. Okay? And then I want to go on to topic number 8, which is exactly the same topic he brought up, that the minimum requirement for the voting, the way this is written, is 116 versus 387, which is correct. And I have a real problem with that. Our documents are the only thing that protects us homeowners from a renegade board. And these changes, these 3 changes that have been talked about are made available to the board. Your rights as a homeowner have been dramatically diminished. And an errant board in the future can go off on their own and do what they want. They can spend your checkbook and you don't have any recourse. That's the 3 things I found in here. Now, until we get the full write-up, there may be more. But those are the 3 significant things that take away the homeowner's rights and give it to 3 members on the board. And I'm totally opposed to that. And I hope the rest of you. Me too.
Steve, what's the special assessment rule for this board or this association? Do you know?
And here,
He asked, I'm sorry, I was told to repeat the question, I did not. His question was, what is the special assessment mechanism or approval threshold of the documents? On the top of my head, I don't know, but I will be able to tell you what it is now. The statute, I can tell you what this, as I'm looking, the statute is that special assessments are within the board's discretion. That the board adopts a budget, and if the budget is inadequate or not enough for some reason, the board alone would have the ability to do that. The documents. The proposed documents would say the total of all special assessments coming due in the fiscal year should not exceed 15% of the total annual budget for that year, including reserves, unless a majority of the total voting interest present in person by proxy and meeting first consent. So there is a cap in the new documents under the board's ability to special assess.
So my point is that right now the board has the ability to special assess every year 15% of what your budget is. And
That's not. The current board,
Oh,
the current
what
board,
board?
well, I mean, the current board knows this, because we did it 2 years ago. The special assessment requires it to go home.
That's right.
that's not what he said.
I'm reading the proposed documents.
Oh, wait, he's reading it, so.
The proposed documents say a total of all special assessments shall not exceed 15% of the total annual budget for that year, including reserves, unless membership so approves.
I'm looking for who has the power to special assess.
Right, well, the answer is that the board of directors is in control of the budget.
Okay. So where is that wrong, that the board has the power to special assess? That's my statement.
No, not really. The board has to go to the membership and get a 50%.
That's not what he's reading.
Well, I'm telling you what's in the current document.
Okay.
I know what's in that document.
Well, I'm on 2 other boards, and the 2 other boards that I'm on, we have the power to special assess without going to your association. Well, it's not.
Please,
No, that's not the point. The point is that the board, if the board has a fiducial responsibility, they're going to find another way to do that, and we're worried about wait a minute, let me talk. I let you talk, and I didn't interrupt you. My point is that we have the responsibility to make ends meet, and when that doesn't happen, the board finds a way to do that and is required to find a way to do that. And to argue that the special assessment, this one thing, is going to be misused by a rogue board is kind of, missing the whole point of it. They're gonna, if the board is not responsible, they're gonna find all kinds of ways to make our lives miserable. And that's just a small little thing, but yeah, let them find that, I'm not sure. But on the 2 that I'm on, 2 other ones that I'm on, the board has the power to do that unilaterally of the association's membership. But you want to look at that later and answer
Yeah,
questions?
I can
Don't take
answer
up too much
questions.
time.
Yes, sir.
okay, Colin,
I can have a question that I'm a little confused on.
Take a
I'm
seat.
not going to talk about the
Comment.
Take a seat.
I'm sorry?
you don't have to approach the board.
I'm not working the board, sir.
How can we hear?
I'd like to ask this question. You want to raise it from $5,000 to $30,000, which is a $600% increase. Obviously, somebody has a project in mind that we don't know about. Okay? My question is this. If we give you the authority to spend $30,000 at any time, and I'm going to take a hypothetical here, Steve, and we spend it 5 times this year, that's $150,000. Now, I'm not saying that's what the board's going to do, but it's very possible if they want to, they can. How do we get that money back into operating budget? Do we get a special assessment from the board because we are broke? Is that how the money's put back if it's overspent? Because at $5,000, we have a right to say no to anything we don't want. At $30,000, they can spend it 3 times, 5 times, 8 times, 12 times, 15 times, with no recourse. We would just like to know if you spend the money, and let's say you spend $150,000, I'm not saying you will, Is it mean we have an assessment back to replenish the budget? I think it's a very fair question.
The memo did include 3 very important, 6 very important, 7 very important words. Okay? So the proposed document says, in the aggregate, in the calendar year.